I arrived at my son's engagement dinner when the bride whispered mockingly, "The stinking farmer is here." I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm and murmured, "Stay calm. Tomorrow comes our revenge." In that moment, "My name is Theodore Collins. I am 58 years old. I am an Australian farmer from the Riverina. I have worked the land since I was a boy. Wheat, sheep and a small vineyard. Widowed for 12 years. Quiet by nature, stubborn by necessity, and known in town as the man who keeps his promises. I raised my only son Oliver with soil under our nails and sunrise as our clock. This is my story and the moment that changed everything and pulled the truth into the light." I arrived at my son's engagement dinner wearing my best jacket that still smelled faintly of the farm. I had driven 4 hours after a 14-hour day. The restaurant was glass and golden voices. I felt out of place the second I stepped inside. As I moved toward the table, I heard the bride lean close and whisper mockingly that the stinking farmer is here. The words cut deeper than any blade. My first instinct was to turn and leave, to spare my son embarrassment and myself humiliation, but Oliver grabbed my arm gently and murmured that I should stay calm and that tomorrow comes our revenge. In that moment I saw a look in his eyes I had never seen before, steady and resolved, not angry but prepared. I stayed. I sat. I smiled when spoken to. I ignored the glances and the snickers. The bride name was Amelia Hart, 29 years old, corporate consultant from Sydney, polished voice and diamond laughter. Her parents were there as well. Richard Hart, a property developer with a shark smile, and Elaine Hart, elegant and sharp as glass. They spoke of investments and overseas travel. They asked me about rainfall and tractors with thinly veiled boredom. Oliver stayed close to me the entire night, refilling my water, nodding when I spoke, grounding me. I realized then that my son was no longer the boy I raised. He was a man who had planned something carefully. On the drive back to the motel, Oliver told me to trust him. He said that people who mock what feeds them often forget who owns the ground beneath their feet. He told me that love sometimes needs truth to survive, and that tomorrow the truth would arrive whether anyone wanted it or not. I did not ask questions. I trusted the son I raised. The next morning was the engagement ceremony itself, held at the Hart's private estate outside town. Manicured lawns where grass had never known drought, hired waiters, photographers, music drifting like perfume. I stood at the back watching as guests arrived. I noticed a few unfamiliar faces among them, men and women in plain suits, quiet, observant. I recognized one of them as a woman who worked at my bank, another as a man from the agricultural board. Oliver had invited them. As the ceremony began, Richard Hart took the microphone and spoke about family legacy and prosperity. He spoke about how Amelia had chosen well, how Oliver was ambitious, and how together they would build something powerful. When he mentioned that Oliver came from humble origins, he laughed lightly. The crowd laughed with him. Amelia did not look at me once. Then Oliver stepped forward and asked to speak. He thanked everyone for coming. He thanked the Harts for their generosity. And then he turned to me and thanked me for teaching him patience and honesty and the value of soil. The room quieted. He then said that before they could proceed there were matters of transparency he believed were essential to marriage. He spoke calmly. He said love without truth is just a performance, and then he invited a woman forward. She introduced herself as a forensic accountant. What followed felt unreal. She explained in simple terms that Richard Hart Company had been under investigation for months. Illegal land acquisitions, forged consent documents from rural owners, pressure tactics used on farmers during drought years. One of those farmers was me. I felt the air leave the room. I remembered letters I had signed under pressure years ago when water rights were threatened. Oliver had quietly reopened those cases while studying law in secret. He had built his career not in corporate mergers but in agricultural justice, something he never told me to avoid my worry. The accountant continued. The properties the Harts bragged about were tied up in litigation. The estate we stood on was mortgaged beyond value. The engagement funding was borrowed against assets that were about to be seized. The quiet guests stepped forward next, representatives from the bank and the board, confirming the investigation and the imminent freeze. Richard Hart tried to speak but words failed him. Amelia stared at Oliver as if seeing a stranger. Oliver then said that he loved Amelia once, but love cannot survive contempt. He repeated her words from the dinner, not mockingly but plainly. He said that anyone who despises the hands that feed them will eventually starve in their own arrogance. He ended the engagement there. No shouting, no drama, just truth placed carefully on the table. Amelia tried to apologize later. Privately, she said stress made her cruel. Oliver listened and thanked her for the honesty and walked away. I watched my son choose dignity over convenience. The guests left quietly, the music stopped, the estate felt hollow. That evening Oliver and I sat on the motel balcony. He told me the revenge was never about humiliation, it was about balance. He wanted the truth out before a marriage built on lies trapped both of them. He said that real power is choosing when to stop. Weeks later the case concluded. Farmers received restitution, including me, but I donated most of it to a cooperative fund for drought relief. Oliver returned to his work quietly. He did not give interviews. He did not boast. Amelia moved overseas. Richard Hart faced charges. The estate was sold. Life continued. I returned to my farm. The soil welcomed me back. The vines were heavy with fruit. One morning Oliver visited. He brought no fancy car, just boots and a smile. We worked side by side in silence until sunset. I realized then that the real revenge was not watching others fall. It was watching my son rise without losing himself. It was knowing that the farmer they mocked had raised a man who understood justice, and that the ground beneath us remembers everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place?